Howdy, 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 howdy. Hey everybody. I'm pumped that everybody is here. I'm pumped that everyone's got some good food and drinks. We do a little bit of content at these events, and it's content time, y'all. So I'm gonna get into a little bit of the presentation for today. It's gonna be a short one today, so I won't bore you guys. I won't run your ear off. What we're talking about this happy hour is how to analyze opportunities, how to analyze deals. It's something that is important, especially as the real estate market gets more competitive, especially as interest rates get higher and margins get thinner. If you want to make it in this business, you have to be very good at the analytical side of things, and you have to be very good at understanding your numbers and running your numbers. So I'm going to run through a property that, truthfully, I have not looked at yet. I checked and made sure it was reviewing offers right now as we speak, so I'm not going to steal anyone's thunder because they are going to put an offer in and now all 30 of you know that it's a good deal. It's reviewing offers right now, so it's not a live deal, but it is one that at quick glance looks like it could be interesting. So I'll pull up the opportunity. I have not run numbers on it before. I'm going to set a 5-minute timer and I'm going to see what I can do in 5 minutes, and then we'll talk through what I did, why I did it, and then also kind of open the floor to you guys for both questions and then also you sharing your experience about how you look for opportunities, if you have any kind of rules of thumb or tricks, especially since when the market is moving quickly, you have to move quickly as well. And a lot of these opportunities, you know, when you have a lot of opportunities on your plate, it can really make sense to have a really quick metric where you can, within 5 minutes, take a look and figure out whether it's something that you're going to pursue further or something that you're going to walk away from. So that's what we'll do today. Before we do have sponsors for this event. David Weiser at Backyard ADU is an amazing builder who was here earlier with his daughter. He had to go home, but his contact info will be in the email that we send out to y'all afterwards. So definitely reach out to him if you're considering a DADU project, if you have questions about that strategy. Obviously super hot. The one that I was gonna pull up today looks like a good DADU candidate, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. On the conventional lending side, Kara Rosansky at Origin Point Mortgage. Many of you know her, she's amazing. She's been in the mortgage business for a very long time. Her cards are out on the table since she is not able to be here today. But she would love it if you give her a call if you have any questions about conventional mortgages. She's been in the business for over a decade and owns rental properties herself, so she's a very good resource there. I'm going to pull up our third sponsor before I actually start talking to share a little bit about his business and what he's able to help with around investments in general and DADU opportunities in particular. So please welcome Israel Lopez from Certain Lending.
Thank you for having me today. So as far as, my name is Israel and I see a lot of familiar faces here, and we focus primarily in the 1 to 10 unit space and pretty much nationally. But I predominantly focus here locally, financing investors when it comes to fix and flips, ADUs, new construction, and then of course non-traditional 30-year loans. Here locally, the ADU strategy or the DADU play has become very hot. You've got the master himself, Thach, preaching it to everybody. Go get a burr, go get a burr, what are you doing, come on. So as far as figuring it out, we were kind of one of the early lenders that were actually like, all right, we know that this is coming down the pipeline and this is a hot product, something that a lot of people are trying to build. And really why it's become so popular is because the margins are there. A lot of the times you're able to build in 50% margins. Let's say you're building for 300 to 400,000 and the ADU is worth 600 to 800,000. Tell me that's not a good deal. Like, where else can you find a flip with those types of margins? So we're like, all right, let's put our thing caps on and what are the current limitations out in the marketplace and how can we solve it? So when it comes to building new construction in ADUs, a lot of construction lenders won't give you financing unless you have plans and permits. But we know that the city of Seattle will give you permits within 60 to 120 days. So we're like, all right, well, we're going to start offering a product where we're able to not only finance a fixer and finance the renovations all in one loan, but also give ADU financing as part of that prepackaged deal when people are building ADUs. So there's a couple different ways that you can go about financing an ADU. There's conventional financing, and then you've got the hard money route, and then you can kind of blend the two as well. So on the conventional side, a lot of times you're buying a property that's in livable condition. So you're buying it with a 5% or 20% down mortgage, and you're just buying it to buy yourself time. You're going ahead and getting permits, and then refinancing into a new construction loan. On our side of things, we're only giving you one loan for the full thing, where we're going ahead and helping you buy it, renovate the existing structure, and also allow you to tap into a $300,000 or $400,000 budget to build the ADU. Now, why is that advantageous, and why do you have to do two loans on the conventional side versus one loan on the hard money side? So when you build, when you're going out and doing the ADU strategy, there's something called a release provision. So a lot of conventional lenders don't actually give you a release provision. A release provision essentially is, okay, you have one property with a single family on the left side and you've got a DADU on the right side. And at the end of the day, you're going to condoize and create two tax IDs, one for each. And the conventional lender, they have no business in releasing their interest on that DADU loan. So the only way you can do that is once you have permits for the DADU, you have to refinance just the existing structure that's been renovated or is in livable condition, and then go get a construction loan on the ADU. Whereas we're like, you know what? Give a full loan on the full thing, so that way you don't have to worry about financing, and you can just go ahead and focus on actually executing and getting in and out as fast as possible. So we're giving a loan for the full thing, and when it comes time to sell or refinance any of the two structures, we'll release our interest because we know that you've already forced value in the property, and our loan to value is protected. So from that standpoint, we're like, you know what? It makes a lot of sense. Why make folks get two loans when you can only do one, and that way you can focus on the execution. So there's a lot of different scenarios that come out when doing the AD strategy, and I'm always happy to talk through it with you, depending on what your strategy is. You can try to do it owner-occupied. I've actually done it, where I've got an owner-occupied scenario. For a lot of you, hard money lending, we only touch investment purpose properties. So when you say owner-occupied, a lot of hard money lenders get scared and walk the other direction. But when you condoize, you say you live in the property, you buy with conventional, you live in the existing structure, and you condoize, you've created two tax IDs where that DADU is now not owner-occupied. This can be business purpose, and this can be an owner-occupied property. And I've done that recently with a client. So a lot of different scenarios we can walk through and talk about. Anything I left out?
No. That's sequencing is one of the biggest questions that we get about DADUs, right? It's just like, I understand all these pieces, and I had a conversation with a client the other day where he was trying to figure out if he had enough cash to take down this deal, and he said, well, I need like 1.4 million, right, for this DADU, is that right? It's like, no, you need purchase price, and then you need renovation of the single family house, and then you need permitting costs for the DADU, and then you need build costs for the DADU, right? These things don't happen simultaneously, so if you can set yourself up with a lender that understands the process and ideally minimizes your refinance count, you can have a lot more success. The reality is everyone gets scared about hard money because of the high interest rates, but points are what really kill investors on loans, right? Like it's the points that you pay up front, the loan fees, that can really eat into your margin. So a higher interest rate loan that you don't need to refinance out of versus a conventional loan that you need to refinance twice before you get into permanent financing could be pretty comparable, even if the hard money loan has higher points. So lots of cool opportunities. Definitely grab Israel after this to chat about that. Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Speaking of folks that you should chat with after this, we do have most of our House Hack Seattle team here. We are all investors. We are all real estate agents. We can definitely answer your questions about both sides of the coin, right? What the real estate market is doing right now, it's pretty wonky and has been for the last 4 years, spoiler alert. And what we're doing personally, what we're recommending our clients do in the investment space, and what we're seeing as the biggest opportunities. Obviously, DADUs are a big one. There are lots of other ones that get less publicity and less press and are a little bit less competitive as well. So here's the team. Definitely feel free to reach out to any of us that you see in and around here. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to share our experience, and we'd love to connect. So y'all are my people. I am going to like open a spreadsheet here in front of you and like look at a real life property. I swear we'll do it nice and quick. But I love that everyone here came to a event that was focused on like analyzing properties, because this is not the glamorous side of real estate. This is not the big picture, buy it for 600, sell it for 800, look at my profit, Lambo speech. This is like the nitty gritty, let's know our numbers, let's know what we're getting into, and let's like really set ourselves up for success speech. So when we're thinking about properties and we're thinking about the opportunities that are in front of us, there's really three big buckets that I use when I'm analyzing properties, right? The buckets are appreciation or equity. So how much money can I make on this property? My strategy tends to be buy and hold, but you still should be concerned with the equity that you have in your properties, because having equity opens a lot of opportunities for you. Mainly, you can refinance, you can pull that equity out through a home equity line of credit and spend it. And when it does come time to sell the property, you obviously have a profit. In addition to that, the things that I pay really close attention to are rent ratios. I put rent ratios first before cash flow, because a lot of investors get really obsessed with cash flow. But the reality is that rent ratios are permanent, cash flow is temporary, right? So interest rates could spike down to 5%, or they could go up to 9% tomorrow. They have been very volatile lately, and that will dramatically change the cash flow of the property. But the rent ratio, which when I say rent ratio, the ratio between the purchase price and the gross rents for the property, that ratio will stay about the same. So oftentimes I pay more attention to numbers like the gross rent multiplier, which is the yearly gross rents divided by the purchase price. Sorry, reverse that. The purchase price divided by the yearly gross rents. I pay more attention to numbers like that than cash flow, because those numbers are consistent regardless of what interest rates are at. Whereas cash flow depends on your financing type, it depends on your money down, it depends on your credit score, so it's a little bit harder to compare apples to apples with that. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show really quickly what I do when I'm pulling up a new property and how I look at these opportunities. So we're just going to pop into the MLS here. If you've ever looked on Zillow or Redfin for properties, you're looking at the same data as the MLS. Granted, it's a little bit harder to work through in a lot of ways, but since I'm an agent, I'm going to use the MLS here. There's a property in Finney Ridge that I know one of the agents on our team put an offer in on. I haven't seen it, but it looks like a good opportunity. It's this one right here for $725. So that's what we're going to pull up. The very first thing as an investor that you should be doing is knowing your market, right? So in Finney Ridge, we know that it's a very nice, expensive market. For Seattle, the school district is very good. It's close to Green Lake. It's very desirable. So the very first thing I'm noticing is $725 is not a typical sale price for Finney Ridge. This property, the next thing I do is I pull up the pictures. When I'm looking at properties, I actually go backwards on the pictures, because typically agents will pull up the best pictures first and the worst pictures last. And I'm curious what the basement looks like. I'm curious what the less attractive parts of the property looks like. So I'm going to go backwards here and start with the kitchen, which is a train wreck. Train wreck, train wreck, train wreck. Just all around, this is like a pretty heavy flip of a property. So looking at this, it looks like it needs a lot of work. These properties tend to be relatively easy to get rough numbers on, because you can kind of assume that you're replacing pretty much everything, right? Things like this furnace here with the crazy web, right? We're definitely replacing that. So from there, the first thing that I would do if it looks like a replace everything property is I'd go to the tax information and I'd try and figure out how much actual square footage this property is, right? It's listed as 1,300 on the MLS, but there may be a basement that's included. There may be a basement that's not included. There's no real rules about how you list square footage on properties, so I'll always check the tax records to make sure that I know what I'm looking at. So on this property, if we scroll down on the tax records, we see that the total living square foot is that 1,390 that was mentioned in the listing, but the gross area is 2,130. So there is a basement with 740 square feet that's not included in that listing. So I'll flip back to the pictures at this point. The basement looks like it's tall ceiling height. In Seattle, you need 6'4", hard minimum below like beams, anything to be able to count that as living space. 6'8" is the target, and 7 feet or above is like nice. So it's important that you figure out what the actual height is in this basement when you visit the property, because it's very hard to tell from pictures. Looking at pictures, I typically just try and come up with a rough estimate, and based on these pictures, it's pretty hard to tell, but it does seem like there's enough height to finish that basement. So I would count. You've been to this house? What's the basement height? About 7.2. 7.2? Glorious. Yeah. Love it. So anything above 7 is a really good spot to be in Seattle, because you can put drywall, you can put flooring, and you can still be at 7 feet, which is kind of the cutoff where it feels like part of the home. Anything less than 7 feet often feels like a basement, right? So knowing that we're going to finish the basement, knowing that the total square footage is this 2130, the next thing that I'll do is I'll try and come up with a rough idea of rehab costs. When I'm doing this for a property that does not need everything, I typically use our House Hack Seattle spreadsheet, because we've kind of put a lot of work into this rehab calculator tab and have broken down the per square footage costs of every project under the sun. Your mileage will vary depending on the contractor, but this can be a really good place to start. For a project like this, I usually won't itemize out each individual task, because the reality is that it needs pretty much everything. I'll use like per square footage estimates, which for us, I think I have numbers here at the top. For us, it tends to be like, here we go. For studs out, it tends to be 85 square feet plus. Studs out is anytime you're ripping drywall and you're doing all the electrical, plumbing, etc. And for like cosmetic, paint, carpet, flooring, it tends to be $40 a square foot plus. That's kind of the baseline, and it can go up from there quite a bit. So based on that estimate, if we're at 2,100 and we're hitting like $85 a square foot, give or take, we're probably spending about $200,000 renovating this house. So based on those assumptions, right, we're purchasing it for at least $725. It's on the market, it's probably escalating. $200K, right, to renovate it, so we're in it for at least $925. If you're thinking about equity, the very first thing that you should do is just look really quickly at comparable sales. And when I'm looking at comps, I tend not to get too caught up with bedrooms, bathrooms, all these little details about the property. I tend to really want to do just a really quick take first, and that quick take is mostly based on square footage. So I would just go to properties that are on the market or that have sold recently, and I would just go plus or minus, 20% or so of this property's square footage. So 2140 is the square footage, 20% would be about 400 square feet. So I'd go from like 2540 to 20 or 1740 and just pop that range in. Whoop. I need the address though. And then you look at just a little bit of a radius around the property. I tend to do like a quarter mile or so if it's in a dense part of Seattle. You can do a larger radius outside of Seattle, or if you're looking at an area that doesn't have a lot of comps. But I would rather pick houses that are close by in a place like Seattle that aren't exactly the same than take houses that are farther away that are more similar, just because Seattle is very neighborhood specific, right? The area around Finney Ridge is very nice, but you get a little closer to Aurora, you get up north to Holler Lake, and it can change pretty quickly. That's even more so true on the south end of Seattle, where there are neighborhoods like North Beacon Hill, where I live, that are really nice. And then you head down the hill to Rainier, and it's like a whole different world down on Rainier. So we want to be as close to this subject property as we can, and ideally be looking at areas that are not like across major thoroughfares or highways or other kind of lines of demarcation in the map, so that they feel like the same neighborhood. So we only have 4 matches, which is not great. But the next thing I do is I just pull this up really briefly, and I look kind of broadly speaking at what we've got, right? We've got a sale for 975. That looks like it's kind of the outlier here, but it's decently nice. And then we've got three sales, excuse me, of above $1 million. A townhouse here that is not the same type of property, another townhouse that's not the same type of property, and then a single family home for 1.2. Right, so pretty quickly, if I was looking at this property, I would assume that since this is a single family home for 1.2, and it's the only single family home in that list of comps, and it does look like it's been pretty remodeled, that I should be in that 1.2 give or take range. If you're actually trying to buy this property, you want to go a lot deeper into it, but if you're on Zillow and you're trying to figure out while you're at the property whether you've got a real opportunity on your hands or not, this is often enough to get you close enough to figure out whether you should pursue it further. So if we're buying it for 725, we're putting 200 into it, that's 925, and we're selling for 1.2, that's a margin that is workable. A lot of people look for 30% margin on their deals. 30% can be pretty hard to hit nowadays, but we're probably around 20%, right, with those current numbers, which is good. So that's the equity side of things. Cash flow is a little bit easier oftentimes to calculate, but it's the same exact process, right? We're not going deep into the weeds on these properties. We're looking for very quick takes at what we can expect, generally speaking, and whether there's a real opportunity here or whether there's a property that we should walk away from. For cash flow and for rental income, we use tools that estimate averages for the area. So for rents, we use Rentometer. For long-term rentals, we use STR Insights for short-term rentals, and then just plug all those numbers into this calculator that we've got right here to figure out the cash flow, to figure out the gross rent multiplier, and to figure out all those other numbers. And that's where your experience in the market comes in. If you just analyze one property in a vacuum, it can be kind of tough to tell whether you've got a real opportunity on your hands or not. But if you do this over the course of weeks multiple times, you'll start to understand the trends, and you'll start to know that, hey, in Finney Ridge, I can expect this gross rent multiplier and this one is better, right? And that's really all we're doing as investors, is we're looking for discrepancies. We're looking for opportunities where one of these things is not like the other, and then we're pouncing on them, right? Ideally quickly before someone else does. So that's my process for looking through these deals. I won't run through the whole rental calculator here because it's both pretty straightforward and pretty monotonous. But when you actually plug all these numbers in, it'll spit out a cash flow number, and it'll spit out a gross rent multiplier number. And if you've been doing this for a while, you should have a folder with all your past properties, and you can compare the results on this one to those ones and figure out whether you've got a better than average opportunity or not on your hands. I'm curious now, rather than to dive deeper into this deal, I'm curious what other people's experiences are in analyzing properties, whether you have kind of tips and tricks that have served you well, like rules of thumb when you're moving quickly, or whether you have questions about the process that we talked about. So I'll open it up to y'all now, if you want to share. But to be fair, the first couple properties I bought, I had absolutely no system in place for them either. So it's part of this is you trust your gut, oftentimes as an investor, until your gut betrays you, and you get hosed on a deal, and then you do the hard work of looking at how you should actually analyze deals moving forward without relying so much on your gut. That was my experience, at least. It does help when you're looking at a property like Louise was, and you bring it up to another investor and they're like, oh yeah, I've seen that property, I've been inside that house, right? That there's some validation in that. If you're looking at an opportunity and no one else thinks it's an opportunity, that's a red flag, because there are a lot of investors here. So most of the real opportunities have multiple eyes on them. Yeah.
What's kind of your green flag for rent ratios? Like, what gets you excited when you're at that step of the calculation?
It's changed a lot over the years because of interest rates. I use the gross rent multiplier, which is just, you take the monthly rent for all the units on the property, you multiply it by 12, that's the gross yearly rents, and then you have that in the denominator, the bottom of the fraction, and on the top of the fraction you have the total purchase price plus rehab costs for the property. And a really good way to think about gross rent multiplier is it's how many years of rent are you buying this property for, right? If the gross rent multiplier is 12, that means that every year you're pulling in 1/12 of the purchase price plus renovation costs and rent. And obviously, just like golf, lower numbers are better with that. For a long time, I was targeting 13 and under, and I got very excited about 10s, 11s, and sometimes 12s. We're still targeting about the same because the market is tough, but the catch is that a 13 and under used to be a pretty high cash flow property, and now is like kind of a break even or even potentially negative if you do a low down payment option. So those metrics do change, and that's another reason why I like using that multiplier, because the cash flow has changed so dramatically in the last few years. Yeah.
It's the same thing with the cap rates.
The reason I don't like cap rates is they take into account expenses, and in my experience, owners lie about expenses either because they're not truthful or because they just don't track them accurately. I look at cap rates all the time that are like this triplex with, a huge lawn, and it has $0 in landscaping expenses. And I'm like, yeah, I have a feeling that either you're paying for landscaping or you're mowing that lawn yourself, sir. And either way, once you sell it, someone's got to mow it. Same with like repair costs. You can inflate the cap rate on a property by just letting it fall apart and not doing any repairs over a long period of time. Or you can have a gorgeous property that's been very well maintained that has a low cap rate because over the last 5 years the owner has fixed everything. So in that case, a low cap rate property could be a better opportunity than a high cap rate property, because I would rather buy a property that's been cared for than one that hasn't, right? Apples to apples. Yeah, I think it does make sense to write offers where they make sense, right? You can get a little bit caught up with what everyone else is doing, up to a point, right? Like if you're writing, offers 100K below list on properties that are escalating 300K above list, like at some point you have to take a hard look in the mirror and ask yourself whether you're wasting everyone's time or not. That said, I think that we can get tricked in two ways. In one way, because we're like trying to figure out what everyone else is offering on the property. And the great irony of that is that you can overpay for a property and still feel good about it because other people were also willing to overpay, right? And then on the flip side, I think we get too trapped by list price. As a listing agent, I know that list price is a marketing strategy, just like good pictures, just like a good description, just like pushing the house out to your network of contacts in the real estate business. And the reality is that you can get a lot of buyers that are really actively looking all to flock to a single house by putting a teaser list price on it. And that house will often sell for more. So the other trick when you're running numbers is to either have a good sense of the market when something is underpriced, or have a good realtor that will let you know when something is underpriced, and not focus so much on that underpriced listing because of the list price that you miss fairly priced listings that are actually better opportunities, right? All this advice goes out the window if you're talking one-on-one with a seller and there's not much other competition in the room. But if this is a listed property, we can kind of assume that it's going to sell for about what people are willing to pay for it. And what people are willing to pay for it is a function of how many people see it. And a lot more people see properties that are listed low than see properties that are listed high. So oftentimes you end up in a worse situation with that teaser low list price than you would on a fairly priced property. What's the biggest escalation that you've ever put on a property? Does anyone have a massive one? 250. My house that I live in right now is listed for $640 and I bought it for $820. So I was like 180 over.
Crazy.
The very first house I bought was listed for $500 and I bought it for $480. My 180K escalation over list was a 10 times better deal, hands down, than my 20K below list, right? So that's the trick and that's the trap that you fall into. Like list price doesn't mean anything. When I bought my first house for 20K under list, I thought I was getting a good deal. It was just a bad house, right? That's why I was able to negotiate it down. It was a bad house, no one wanted it. Whereas this house that went 180K above, like I probably could have gone higher and still hit my numbers on because it was a rock star deal.
Are you still house hacking?
I am still house hacking. Yeah, I'm on my 4th house hack right now. My house is nice, so I'm pretty comfortable. I'm probably gonna move to like a waterfront home with a dock at some point, and it's gonna have another unit in it for sure. Yeah. Yeah. It may be more because of my parents and mother-in-law than rental income. But the reality is that like these extra units are here to stay, and they're so multifunctional and they're so valuable, not just to us as investors, but to people in different life stages who need live-in nannies or have aging parents, right? So I think there's no reason not to house hack, in my opinion. It's just a matter of how you house hack, right? And you can buy a $4 million waterfront property with an ADU on it and have your mother-in-law live in there and still, still be taking advantage of this wave that's sweeping Washington with additional dwelling units. Yeah, which is the right way to run numbers, right? Because you see a lot of these guys, especially on social media, that are talking purchase price, rehab cost, and sale price. And the reality is there's a lot of other costs associated with that besides purchase price, rehab costs, and sale price, right? Holding costs are huge. Fees are huge. Excise tax in the state of Washington is huge, right? So it's also important to look at the real cost of actually doing that deal before you get excited about the margin. Yeah, but if you're holding for a year and you're in hard money, you might be spending 40, 50 grand just on fees or just on interest on that loan, so that can eat profit pretty quick. Yeah, it's a good question. We do have like in our calculator, and this is a change that we made in the current market, we do look at like the cash on cash return on properties, but also the appreciation, the loan pay down, and the tax savings, like all four, right, that we focus on as real estate investors, because typically in this current market, cash on cash is like very, very low, and that's probably a good deal, and oftentimes like neutral or even potentially negative for some deals. And that can really make it so you're not able to pull the trigger on anything, right? The reality is that we're not, as real estate investors, we're not so much competing against these milestones like, oh, cash on cash needs to be 8+%, right? We're competing against the next best opportunity, right? We know as investors that the alternative, trading our hours for money over and over and over again over the course of our life, is not the strategy that's going to yield long-term financial freedom and long-term wealth. We know that we have to invest in something. The entire American and world economy is set up to reward investors. And if we don't pull the trigger on anything, it's often worse than if we had pulled the trigger on something that was just okay, right? So that's not a encouragement to buy bad deals, but it is like a harsh truth that if you come in looking for 12% cash on cash returns in this market, you may just look forever, right? And I would rather you buy something below that margin and get in the game and start reaping the benefits of investing than to like sit on the sidelines forever. So the benefit of these calculators are, one, we're comparing against past properties that we've analyzed, and two, we're trying to calculate the total benefit, total economic benefit of holding these properties. And oftentimes that's quite a bit higher than the cash flow that you receive monthly. Yeah. The kind of unsung hero of investing in real estate is rental increases, right? The reality is that the properties that I've owned for 5+ years often rent for just head and shoulders more than what I bought them for. My oldest property is 2016. It rents now for $8,200 gross. It's a 3-unit in Beacon Hill. When I bought it and did a light renovation and then listed it, I think I was getting $4,900 or $5,000 in gross rents. So even just in the course of 8 years, you can have like a 50% increase in your rental income. And that's where your eyes really open when you've had a few of those and you realize that it's more important to buy assets in good areas that have long-term potential than it is to sweat the day one cash flow. Cool.
Do you raise rents most years, or do you wait for turnover?
I don't, which is why I hired a property manager to be the bad guy for me. Shout out to Vincent at Sigarius in the back row there. Since I was a house hacker, I lived in a lot of my units, and I had good relationship and friendships with my tenants. And I did raise rents pretty much every year because they are going up every year in Seattle. But I did, it was nice for me and my family to build a little bit of separation and run it a little bit more like a business. That said, we still, cut people deals. We still are very flexible with tenants, especially non-paying tenants, and our preference is always to get everyone back on their feet and going their separate ways, not to go through the complicated legal process that can be part of non-paying tenancy. So I think there's a blend of run it like a business and then also don't be an asshole in this business, right? And you need to find exactly where that balance is for yourself, because if you let people walk over you all the time, you just won't be able to last in this business. But at the same time, no one wants to get rich off of the expense of others. So I think as a landlord, you benefit quite a bit by going into the business, trying to design a safe, affordable, desirable place for your tenants to live, and then also hoping for the best for your tenants while still, protecting your best interests. And you can't do this business if you don't make money. And striking that balance is tough, I think, especially for people that don't hire property management, which is a big plug for just getting a little bit of separation and getting another person on your side who does this for a business. Yeah, we could have gone deep on that property that we pulled up on DADUs as well, but I think this format is not the best for, maybe I'll do a webinar sometime soon where we go through each step of the analysis process. For DADUs, I've learned the hard way that lot width is really important. So I used to buy 40-foot wide lots all the time, and they were 4,000, 5,000 square feet, so I wasn't worried about it. And I found out later that in Seattle, the height restriction for your DADU actually changes depending on your lot width. 40 feet isn't bad, but you drop down to 38, and it does start to shrink pretty quickly. So I look at lot width. I definitely look at trees, and having an arborist that you can check with for trees is super important. Other environmentally critical areas, steep slope, rivers, right, are good to look out for. And then finally, you touched on the access point, right? I would not build a DADU where there is walking access only. I would always want to either have a driveway or a back alley or a corner so that you can get a car back there. I think at some point people are going to build more walking access DADUs in Seattle, and they will sell, but today there are enough opportunities that have car access that we don't need to settle for those walking access properties. And maybe 10 years from now, after everyone in this room, builds their portfolio and buys up all the good properties, we'll start lowering our standards on that. But for now, I think being a little bit picky about how you get to the properties is going to help your ARV. Yeah. Anything that I missed that you look for? No?
Just starting, but very
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah.
Nice. ADU Universe and the Seattle website, gosh, Much Ado. Yeah, ADU Universe and Much Ado are the two kind of quick plug and play sites that you can go into and just pop an address in and have it do a quick feasibility study for you, and those are super helpful. That's all I've got, but I am going to be around. The rest of the team's going to be around. I appreciate y'all nerding out with me on what was a very analytically focused presentation. The reality is that real estate investing can be a little bit boring at times, and the reason that we do it anyway is because it opens up a whole realm of possibilities for us once we untie our hours from our money and once we start building passive income to do the things that are actually exciting, which is spending time with our friends and family, traveling the world, taking care of those less fortunate, both in your family and outside of your family. And the reality is that the work that we do as real estate investors doesn't have to be glamorous, because we're not doing it just to own houses. We're doing it for the opportunities that owning houses opens in our lives. So I appreciate y'all being here in the room and taking time to go through this. And we have the space until 8:30 or 9, so feel free to keep hanging out, keep enjoying each other's company, and enjoy the drinks and food. We have bathrooms and passes right out for the bathrooms right out by where you checked in. And there is also a parking validation machine, a little silver machine that's signed right there as well. Make sure to put your ticket in and get it stamped before you leave so you can get free parking. And we do this event every single month. Right now it's the third Thursdays. If it changes, we'll let you know. But I would love to see you next time. If you're interested in the DADU strategy in particular, me and David Weiser just finished a build in Wallingford that I'm really proud of. Gorgeous 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath DADU. Assuming I don't get it rented out beforehand, which the city of Seattle will probably prevent me from doing because they won't turn power on to to the site with any kind of reasonable timeline. Ask me about that later, I'll complain your ear off. Assuming that I don't get tenants in beforehand, we're planning on an open house on May 4th, which is Saturday, from 1 to 3 p.m. I'll make sure to include that in the follow-up email, but I'd love to see you guys there. We'll probably get some light bites. Me and David will be talking about the project. It'll be opportunity just to walk through and see what one of these things looks like, all finished up, and I would love to see you there. Thanks, everybody.